Hello. We are officially on our sixth episode of the Current Review podcast. Today, David and I are going to be discussing a ton of EV news, and especially the elephant in the room, and I guess literally and metaphorically, because we have a Republican president now, is Donald Trump's presidency and how that will affect the EV industry. And also, we have tons of other stuff to discuss, including Ford shutting down production of the Ford F-150 Lightning, my experience driving the Fiat 500e, which is a car that I have not been too positive about in the past, and lastly, the GM Equinox EV, and discussing the new LT package that's out now that you can buy, and it actually is the cheapest electric crossover currently on the market, and one that I think is a really, really good car. Not the most exciting, but a really good car overall. It's going to be a lot to discuss in this episode, so thank you all for watching.
Yeah. First off, a Trump presidency.
Yes.
I don't think too many people thought it was going to happen again, but here we are, Yeah.
Yeah, I've tried to stay out of the realm of politics, but I was not thinking. I was pretty certain that Kamala would win. Just listening to this news, I was I went to bed early last night and I was actually going to try to see how long I could go without finding out what the presidency was. And it turns out he did. But thankfully, I wrote an article recently about what would happen if Trump does get in. So I think there's actually some stuff to discuss on that front on Trump's presidency. I think the silver lining in this whole thing is the fact that there's now a relationship between Elon Musk and Donald Trump, for better or for worse. And we know Elon Musk does have a vested interest in the EV industry. So to be honest, I don't know what's going to happen. There's just so many sides and angles we can think about because when we think about EVs, Republicans are generally not huge proponents of EVs. A lot of them dislike EVs significantly, but there's also American manufacturing. And on the local level, we have so many manufacturing ventures, especially like Toyota's battery facility, Lucid, Rivian, Tesla, so many companies. And states love the jobs, regardless, Republican or Democrat. They love jobs, they love advanced manufacturing, and EVs are that. So I think it's too soon to say. Do you have any overarching thoughts right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was interesting. I was watching the exit polls in terms of issues that people cared about the most that affected their decision of which way they voted, and economy, somewhat not surprisingly, was one of them. And I think there's been a lot of post-election analysis that says, okay, economy was one of the hot topic issues. People believe that Trump will help our economy overall. My belief has always been, the reason that our economy is strong and will continue to remain strong is global competition and our ability to compete on a global level. And I think EVs is one of the more exciting industries to invest in. I think Biden invested a lot into renewables and all that in general, which is good. And that is also good. I think EVs have characteristically fallen into that category, which is the reason why it's been politicized. But if you talk to anyone that's in the car space, right, and that knows and sees the growth of cars, I think we've talked about this before, EVs are to stay. EVs are not going anywhere. They are the future of transportation. And so I think in a Trump presidency, we're just going to see more focus on investment into EV manufacturing domestically, right? Which is the right thing ultimately. How that happens, we'll see, right? With Elon being closely tied in there, he might change it so that Tesla is positively advantaged compared to all the other emerging, EV players, which, may or may not be so great. But either way, I think we do have a positive EV future. And, on the optimistic side, Elon did actually build one of the most valuable and transformative EV companies on the planet. So he knows what he's doing. And so if he does happen to get a role in the Trump administration, which I think that was floated at some point, for the reason of Elon's last minute support, maybe we'll see some really good positive EV legislation or EV policies that kind of help move the EV agenda forward in general for the sake of global competition. Because I think that's the view that you need to take a look at is EVs aren't necessarily about investing for the future of our planet, which it is, but it's also for the future of investing in a global competitive market. It's the future of car manufacturing, and we need to be better at making EVs, period.
Perfectly said.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think
I don't know if you want to talk about the Chinese threat, because
Yes, I definitely want to talk about the Chinese threat, but I will say one more
yeah,
note on
yeah,
Elon and Tesla is, I mean, regardless of all the weeds that's happening right now, it's if we just look objectively, Tesla and who was led by Elon Musk, if it was not for Tesla, the US automotive EV industry would not be anywhere near it is right now. I think if Tesla ceased to exist, the EV investments we're seeing right now would be few and far between. You would not see all these other automakers coming out with the like. There'd be no point in the Mach-E because it was just like, who cares? It's like, well, we have the Ford Escape. It's great. It gets 25 miles per gallon. It's an excellent family vehicle. And so now when you have the Model Y that does 0 to 60 in like 4 seconds, 300 miles range, all these like crazy specs, it really makes you reconsider a lot of these traditional vehicles that legacy automakers made, and it just makes them look absolutely ridiculous. It's like, who's just going to buy those anymore?
yeah,
So yeah, Tesla has definitely played a pivotal force, and I don't know. I'm definitely excited to see what will happen because knowing my predictions recently, it's probably not going to be anywhere near where I think they are. But I think there's definitely pros and cons to either presidency for EV industry. But I also think maybe on the Trump administration, we could see a more focus on maybe tax credits for manufacturing in the United States, stuff like that. That doesn't directly involve EVs, but it will also help EV companies. So it might just be for manufacturing in the United States. And if that manufacturing happens to be an electric car company, then they'll also benefit from that. So I don't know. Too soon to say. I think it would be cool to talk with some more people in the political science realm, which we will be talking to next week. So that's going to be an exciting episode. So I don't know.
yeah,
Very interesting.
100%. And I think everyone can sort of agree, especially in this Trump administration, the key to a successful future is us making better EVs.
Hmm.
Right now, I think on a global scale, outside of Tesla, we just can't compete with the other EVs that are coming out from, Chinese companies or even Germany. Germany is really doing some sizable investments into EVs that will start to surpass like our own capabilities, and it's a race to build this new type of vehicle. I think it should be exciting though, right? It's a spur of innovation in a field that hasn't seen really a ton of innovation since I want to say like the 40s,
Hmm.
right? Or maybe even a little bit later when a turbocharger went into the engine. Like, oh whoa, we're seeing something different here. I mean, this is a total pivot. I mean, I see this as like EV, like electrification of vehicles is the next engine, like the internet was for computers, right? Like it's going to
Hmm.
spur a ton of really, really interesting things, interesting products, and be a huge generator of economic prosperity for sure.
Definitely. And yeah, because I think especially when we look at like Tesla's efforts, I mean, I'm gonna be I think like the only really competitive EVs on the market, and I'm gonna exclude a lot of the expensive ones. I'm just gonna focus on more like 40, 30, forty
Yeah,
thousand dollar range. And like all I really see is Tesla because they offer a great product, lots of features for a good price, great performance, etc. And some of the GM EVs, like especially the new Equinox EV, I'm not sure how much money they're making or losing on that, but it's nevertheless a good price point. But you really just like the Volkswagen ID4 lineup. No offense to Volkswagen, horrible value proposition. You're looking at like $40,000 for like 208 miles of range on the base model. It's just like it's just not a great deal, especially when you have like the Equinox for 35 and the Model Y for a little more. And yeah, I think US definitely has to get more competitive with some of its EV offerings from legacy automakers to stand any chance against China.
yeah. I mean, what was it? I was just watching Jim Farley sort of explain his experience because he lived with a Chinese EV for a while, and he admitted he's like, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to give it up because it's so good actually, right? Like it's a pretty decent vehicle. I mean, I think you have to sort of look at the use cases in which these affordable EVs fit in. They're not necessarily road
Mm-hmm.
tripping cars, but they're great everyday cars, and they sort of get the job done from point A to point B. Drop the kids off at school, go to work, pick them up, go grocery shopping, that sort of thing. And the tech I hear is really, really well integrated. I think the other thing that they're doing interesting, and that's maybe a bit different that we haven't done here in the US, is it's very tech led. Like they have cell phone companies that are integrated and leading the charge with building vehicles, right? That's definitely a really new take. I mean, I know the Apple car was a thing for a while, but I believe that's dead for the most part. Is that right? at
I
least what they're
believe
saying
so.
publicly.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to see maybe in this new Trump presidency or administration some effort to get the tech companies to work with the traditional automakers as one way for
Interesting.
them to be more competitive, right? Because let's just admit, like these EVs are pretty much computers on wheels, and
Hmm.
car manufacturers are not very good at computers. They're not very good, but like Google and Apple are very good at computers. What they are really good at is building really big things and building them at
Hmm.
scale. So maybe that's where they can come together. I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah, that would be really interesting if there could be like some incentive to have big tech work with big auto, whether it's, Nvidia and Ford, just like, I don't know, just throwing random companies out there, but to at least, because if I think in the next 4 years, which is next presidency term, basically, um, this is a very, very critical point for us to retool and beef up our automotive industry. And now's a chance. So it would
Yeah.
be really interesting to see some more partnerships getting created.
Yeah, now's the opportunity. So we'll see. Hopefully, the manufacturers respond positively to this new change, on this new
Hmm.
effort. And I will say, I mean, there is something to be said about the strategy that's been, I think Ford and GM recently announced that they're going to focus more on hybrids, um, interim, especially in
Hmm.
the American markets. And from the Scout reservation data that I believe Inside EVs had put out, 80% of the Scout reservations had a Harvester range extender associated with it.
Yes,
And so
that's
I think
very
that
interesting.
that's a strong signal in terms of at least the American market. I know we've sort of said like, why would you do that? I sort of still agree of like, it still is unnecessary, but it might be one of those things where for the consumer psyche, it's necessary to have it available. And then once they go and actually use it and they realize I hardly use the range extender, like it's like maybe once in a while. And if anything, it's more of a pain in the butt to make sure that I run it every once in a while so the engine doesn't go bad.
Yeah.
That like, okay, I can actually go full battery electric, maybe that's what just the
Yes.
consumers need as like a safety net, even though it's not going to be necessary in my opinion.
Yeah, just like that little extra stepping stone. Because like even like the i3 concept, having mainly EV, and then it has like a small motorcycle engine in there just to generate some power, is a pretty good idea. Me, I would still probably just go with the full EV version, but I think there's a lot of people who, even if they never really use it, just to at least get them into an EV, because that's way better. Like, I guess still with the Scout, getting someone in there, right? Getting the Scout, I forgot what it's called, the Terra or whatever it is. That's besides the point. The Scout SUV, to get someone in the Scout SUV with the extended range version, that's a lot better to get someone in that vehicle than a GMC Yukon or something like that. And that's just kind of, an outdated piece of metal.
Yeah, I mean, at least at its core, it is an EV. It's got the regen, right? It's a full electric drivetrain. So, you would get them sort of used to the one pedal driving and some of like the other things that you get used to where like there's no shifting, which is really nice. And those sort of things. And maybe for them to realize like, oh man, actually the gas is the most annoying part about this car. I actually don't need the gas. I can go full electric next time, maybe that stepping stone. And I think that's where like, efforts on the Ram charger, right? Like I've heard some promising things of like, that's what they felt like they needed to do. The only thing is the maintenance. So you lose the benefit of simpler maintenance because you still got to maintain a gas engine, even if you don't use it,
Yeah.
that's the only thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. And just knowing kind of that brand's reliability history. Yeah. I don't know. So I will say, at least with, yeah, because that's the thing. Because for me, you get an EV, so you avoid all the hurdles, drawbacks of an internal combustion engine, and now it's you just get them all back, even if you don't use it, because you still got to run it. You still got to make sure it's not gonna the gaskets and stuff aren't gonna dry up and stuff. So it's just yeah.
The oil goes bad, right? So you got to change the oil, like
Hmm.
it's all that other stuff that you still got to deal with. So
But then again, it is a very use case dependent scenario. So maybe if you lived in Colorado and you're towing up mountains all the time, highway speeds, then it would totally make sense to get one of those. Because even if like I'm not sure how much power the gas generator is going to make, but I mean, if it just supplies enough power to just keep that battery topped off while you're towing, that's going to be pretty awesome for doing long distance towing. And always with hybrids, you get, even though hybrids do have some drawbacks in terms of reliability compared to an EV, you still get the best worlds of ICE and electric, which is really good because maybe if you're towing a boat at 80 miles per hour, it's still doable, and an
yeah,
electric car would be a lot more difficult.
I mean, I don't know if I almost would classify these also as a different hybrid category, right? Because if you take away the engine, it could still operate as a standalone EV. It's not like one of those hybrids where you get like 20 miles maybe, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you're using the engine a lot more. This is really like the engine is there for backup purposes if you start to run low on your battery. And without the engine, you can still go pretty far. I do anticipate that most people in these cases will actually end up using the engine like 1% of the time, you know.
Probably. Yeah, because in my
But
Chevy Volt,
yeah,
I think I average like 600 some miles per gallon, like actual gasoline miles per gallon use, because it's just you
yeah,
use it so rarely. Because it's like, okay, if you're
exactly.
going on a road trip, but like 53 miles can get you pretty far around town. It's definitely going to that's going to include your daily commute easily.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens in the next 4 years, right? And to see how that
Mhm.
sets us up for a greater EV future. But I think everyone acknowledges EVs are going to be a significant part of the mix, and I think everyone's just trying to figure out how to make the best EVs that they can in the most affordable way that they can. And that's the biggest thing is like competing on cost. Like, and I don't know if we want to transition to like the Ford F-150 now
I
and
think we
like the
should, yeah.
reasons why they're shutting down. But yeah. Go ahead
Yeah,
and
so if
give
we
your
go
opinion there.
here to the CNBC article. Yeah, so this is a thing. So Ford is shutting down production of the Lightning, I think starting this month. It's going to last until January. And basically, Ford has a ton of these F 150s on the lots. They're not really selling that well. Here is the big issue with the Ford F 150. And we can say tons of stuff. We can say manufacturing, all this. The biggest thing, the umbrella that encompasses this entire thing, is a car costs way too much money. Is that because it costs a lot to manufacture? Is that because it needs a lot of these battery cells that are very expensive? Probably. Those are all probably things. But the Ford F-150 Lightning is just way too expensive for what it is. It starts at around like $63,000 for like the base model with like cloth seats and like 230 miles of range. It's way too expensive. Considering you can get like a Rivian for around like, I think it's like 70 for the Rivian, that's built from the ground up. It has way better ground clearance. It has air suspension. It can wade through 3 feet of water. Lightning can't do that. It has way more features as standard. It has ventilated seats as standard. It has good audio. So all these features that just keep stacking up. And it's just like, I don't see why anyone would buy the Ford F-150 brand new. People are still buying them. But it's like, it's not a great value proposition for what you get. And it's not even built from the ground up. It's really just a gas F-150 that they shove some batteries in. No, I don't think the Ford F-150 is a bad car, the Lightning. I don't think it's a terrible car, but for what it is, it's too much money. I think if it has a starting price of like 45,000, I think that'll be a pretty good car. With tax credit, you get it in the upper 30s. Great value. Because this truck, let's not forget, it was supposed to be 40K. And then you get the tax credit. So that would have been 32.5. And it's not that price.
Yeah. No, I
So
agree. I mean, it's a
yeah.
great vehicle. It's just not worth
Mm-hmm.
$63,000, right? Like it's,
Yeah.
and I think you're right. And the reason why it's so expensive is because they can't make it any cheaper. Like they're
Yeah.
going to lose too much money. And that goes back to like what I think Ford and the other American car manufacturers need to do is like figure out how to make cheaper cars, right?
Yeah. And I think another thing, so here we are right now, 60K starting price. That's not even with destination fees. It's just like, it's very expensive. And that's the XLT. So you're literally getting like cloth seats, all this stuff. I mean, whatever. I mean, but it's
Yeah.
just, it's not like it's a luxury truck for that much money. It's a base XLT model.
Yeah. I
Very
mean, I think
expensive.
I think like the GMC, which is seen as more of like a premium truck, right, starts kind of
Mm-hmm.
around there. So yeah, like and you're not getting cloth seats. there's like certain premium feels if you're gonna drop over 50K on a vehicle, right? There's some certain expectations in terms of features and what you're getting. And I think you're
Yeah,
right.
so
There's a
actually,
huge gap.
we could do a little comparo with the Chevrolet, the Silverado EV, because the Silverado EV, it's expensive. The Silverado EV is not a cheap truck by any means, but can you actually see my tab right now?
I
Okay,
can't.
I'll share this tab. Okay, can you see it? All right, let me stop and then reshare. Okay, so
There it is.
Silverado EV, which is around the same price point, at least for the higher equipped Lightnings. So this one's 75, not cheap at all, but 408 miles of range in like insanely good charging capabilities. This thing can like hold
Mhm.
300 kilowatts for an very like, charges insanely fast. And this one, 408 miles of range for 75. And then we look at the F-150 Lightning, and that's 76 for the Lariat, or 77 for the Lariat. And that one has 320 miles of range. So less range, or F-150 Lightning can only charge at 150 kilowatts. Silverado EV can do over a three. I think it's like 350 actually for the peak charge rate. Silverado, more range, charges faster, has similar features because the LT has like ventilated seats, Bose audio. I just don't think it has a sunroof, but basically get a lot of features.
I mean, I think the lesson here is Ford tried to go down too quickly into like
Mm-hmm.
more value models. And I think they should have stayed in the premium side a little bit longer while they figured out how to manufacture these things cheaper before
Yes.
releasing releasing like the more economy stuff, or even trying to attempt to offer it, because you're just going to turn people away, and it's it's too early. You haven't quite figured out how to make them cheaper. You have to have people who are willing to pay extra dollars for a premium experience to sort of
Mm-hmm.
subsidize it. And that's what Tesla did, right? Like that was a Tesla strategy, but the Model S was super expensive for a really long time, right? I mean, it was a nice vehicle. It won a lot of awards and that sort of thing, right? But like it was basically like a 100,000, like a six-figure car for a really long time before they were able to bring the price down. And what was it? The time between Model S release and the Model 3, what was that, like 6 years or something like that?
Yeah, because Model S was basically came out 2012, and then Model 3 came out 2017,
Okay, yeah,
five-year gap.
five, five,
Yeah,
5 years or so, right? Like, so it took them 5 years to figure out how to make an affordable car. And even still, I think the Model 3, when they first released it, wasn't really, they
that
still
was like
had a lot
around
of
50.
things they still had to figure out a bunch of things. So, I mean, these things just take time, you know? So I think they'll get there. I think Ford just made a mistake in terms of like what they're currently offering in that range. They should have stayed in the high end and kept low volumes, and not have to shut down their plant. Because I think they ramped up and invested assuming they were going to do a certain production volume, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're like, oh, at this price point, we should be able to sell this many. Well, ends up being at that price point, it's still a terrible product. So, oh man,
Yeah,
the demand's pulling back. We're going to shut down our plant because the demand just isn't there, and it costs money to not make vehicles in a plant, right?
yeah, and I think the worst thing too is people are going to be complaining about it, and then it's going to be used as like an anti-EV talking point, like, oh, they're shutting down because no one's buying these electric pickup trucks. No, it's not that no one's buying electric pickup trucks. No one's buying expensive, really mediocre pickup trucks. I think that's kind of the bigger thing.
100%. I think you're right. I mean, it's just this naysayers think grab on to any little hiccup. But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it makes sense. And if anything, I'm hopeful it's probably not in the story, is while they have the plant shut down, they'll hopefully do some upgrades to the plant to make it better.
Hopefully.
So that for the next year, right, they'll know how to make them cheaper maybe, and more
Mm-hmm.
efficient, and that sort of thing. Have less errors. Because actually I've heard also the early Ford F-150 Lightnings had a lot of issues early on that they were struggling to try to figure out in the field. And they would actually send
Mm-hmm.
like engineers to the dealers, which that costs a lot of money to send an engineer all the way
Yeah.
out to the dealer to troubleshoot like a customer's vehicle. You want to ideally catch all that stuff way ahead of time on the line. So yeah.
Yeah. And I guess the only final point I want to make is I'm not like I don't want to like because obviously engineering a vehicle is very difficult. I'm not like I think the bigger issue with Ford F-150 is they can't really make it that cheap, and it just gives it a high price. And there's really good options that people could consider otherwise, especially Rivian is a huge one, and the Silverado EV, and both those cars offer more range, better charging capabilities. Even though Rivian doesn't have great charging capabilities, but still a lot better than the Ford F-150 Lightning. And then the Silverado EV is just like mind blowing how quick that one charges. So yeah, it's not
Yeah.
the most competitive vehicle anymore.
I mean, I think if anything, the most promising future vehicles that are going to hit the market are the ones that are going to be built down south. I'm just putting it out there. I'm really excited. I know I've heard a lot of positive things about companies that have invested, like BMW, right, in South Carolina, and and the ability for plants down south to make high quality vehicles. I'm pretty excited for like Scout that's investing in it. I know Rivian's put a bit of pause, but I think they're still going to eventually build their plant in Georgia, and anyone else that ends up coming. I think I think that's the exciting thing for me. You know, there's opportunity out there.
Yep. And that's kind of an interesting vibe shift we're seeing with like automotive industry, how the Detroit isn't really seen as the Detroit it was back in like the 60s, 70s, 80s. Now it's kind of moving down here. So just a very interesting trend we're seeing. And also California as well, because California was pivotal with Tesla and a bunch of
Yeah,
other automakers.
for sure, for sure. So
Yep. And I think another thing we want to talk about today is 500E. So I haven't said great things about it, mainly because it's very expensive. But I did get to drive one on a test track at Stellantis's headquarters or their engineering center. I forgot what it was in somewhere around Detroit, which I forgot the name of. But we were in Detroit, so I was driving this car with like a few other people, and I did a few laps on the track. And it was a car like it wasn't like sometimes you get in some cars that just really excite you. Like even the Mini Cooper SE, that's a car that you get in, you're like, wow, this thing's actually pretty cool. You don't really kind of get that in the Fiat 500e. I think I'm not sure what it is because the car's not bad. It was fun. It was kind of playful, but it's just when you just have in the back of your head that's like 35 grand. It's like you kind of expect a little bit more, and I don't know. It was a fine car. I still think it should be cheaper. If that thing was like because here's the thing, because we're going to go into the Equinox EV later, it's the same price as an Equinox EV, and it
that kind of
has
blows your
half the
mind.
range. Yeah, it has half the range, and it barely sits four people. It's very, very tight seating in there. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
At that point, you're probably spending 10 grand just on the brand Fiat, you know, and do you really
Mm-hmm.
like Fiat that much? I personally don't have that much affiliation. I mean, it's a great car brand, but not that good.
Yeah, and I think like right because I drove the Fiat 500e Red Edition, which is kind of cool, like having a product red car. And then I also drove the Inspired by Beauty version, and that one was kind of cool because it's in this like rose gold color. I don't really have much to say about it, but I mean they drive exactly the same powertrains and stuff. But I don't know. I just think for like if we look at this price right here, that's very expensive, 37.6.
Yeah.
So yeah, tough sell. Cool car. It's just kind of, it's like a neat little city car. But I here's the thing. Here's what I'm saying. So I am complaining about this car, but what is going to happen is in 1 year from now, you will be able to buy these for under $20,000. I bet you probably around 15 to 20 within. I think I'll call it. I'll say within the next year. I think within the next year. So that will be November 2025. I think you can get these cars for under $20,000. That's my prediction. And I'm
Well,
usually right
that'll
with my predictions.
that'll be if you're right, that'll be the EV deal of the week in a year from now.
That will be because I predicted the Mercedes EQS to be under 50,000. It was like a year ago. I said, or maybe a little like a year and a half ago. And at that point, I said, 1 year from now, you're going to get these for 50,000. And people were like, no, you're not. And sure enough, now you can get them in the low 40s. But I think at least with like this car, it's like the F-150 Lightning and the fact that it's cool but overpriced. That's a big sign that the car is probably going to depreciate a lot. So I think, and Viats just normally depreciate a lot. And I think especially this being two doors, all the factors adding up, I think this will be an excellent deal in 1 year when you can buy it used.
Yeah, yeah. It'd be interesting to see how the Equinox ages. So I don't know if you want to go and bring that up because to your point, it's the same amount of money as an Equinox, and you're getting way more
Yes.
vehicle, way more like besides the space, right? The specs, the feel. I think you're probably just getting a lot better experience overall, right?
So yeah, I guess we can go directly into the Equinox, which I think is now look, I'm not a huge fan of GM, but if we just look at this car, because not everyone uses all the safety features and stuff, but we look at this. This car is 34,995, and that is, I believe that includes, yeah, that includes the destination fee. So this is a car, 319 miles of range for 35,000. And that doesn't even include the tax credit. So you got a few colors for free, which is nice. You get several colors. I'm a huge fan of Galaxy Gray Metallic because it looks kind of interesting in different sun angles. But that's the car. Now let's see interior. So you get like black cloth seats. It's fine. Nothing too exciting on the interior. But here's where it gets really weird, and this is what we were talking about before recording. Okay, you want the convenience package, $8,300. And what does that include? That includes power driver, lumbar seating, some trailer hitch stuff, power seats, ambient lighting, dimming rear view mirror, like some features, wireless charging. But it's like it's nothing that groundbreaking, but it costs $8,300. What do you think about that, David?
Yeah, and it's just the power driver seat, right? It's just the driver seat that gets that, which it,
Yeah, yeah. Don't get your hopes up. You're not getting a power passenger seat as well.
yeah, it's just the driver seat that gets those features, which like honestly, some of those things that come standard in most, vehicles
Correct.
these days. So
Okay, this is ridiculous. You pay extra because in this package you do not get power up down driver like the windows that you
the
just like
express
press on the
where
button
it's
and they
just
do.
one
See,
press
that's the thing.
down, one press up. That's
Yes,
crazy.
you don't get that on the base. See, this is the thing that I know that they're doing with this car. And the base model, you don't get all those features because they want you to pay extra for this convenience package. And then it's $8,300 for this convenience package, which is insane. It's like for basic features, which is crazy.
I would be surprised if like the window button costs are that different. I think they maybe purposely did it so that they could justify
100%.
higher a higher package like this, just to be able
Mm-hmm.
to say like, all right, this will give us more justification to make it $8,300. And this might be one of those almost bait and switch situations where the base, they're probably losing money on the base, and they're really hoping
100%.
people don't configure the super base, and that the more common is people end up going into the convenience package where they can actually make a little bit of money, you know. Which then at that point, like, why even offer a base that's
Yeah.
so terrible,
Well,
right?
see,
Like you're
because this is the
trying to
thing.
get in, you're
Yeah.
trying to get in like a number. Is that what it is? Like you're just trying to hit a certain number?
Yes, and I think this is the thing that just infuriates me so much with a bunch of like automotive, more legacy automotive journalists. I think I don't know, but this is just something I see. People are like, "Oh, well, do you want to buy the Equinox EV or the Tesla Model Y?" And they're like, "The Equinox EV is cheaper," but then they don't go into the fact that, "Oh, hey, you want like windows that like express windows, like a feature any other car has for $8,300." They just mention like the base specs, but like you get something like a Tesla, and you get all like you get a Model 3, you get ventilated seats as standard, heated seats as standard, premium audio as standard, ambient lighting is standard, all these other features that just kind of add up, glass roof, etc. And GM or like legacy automaker approach will just like string everything out and then make the base model without any of those additionals. So it's an
one
interesting
that one
strategy.
that one that people will never buy. It's like those commercials now that you can't trust the car commercials and they say, oh, starting at 34,995. Like starting
Mm-hmm.
at, but no one's buying it at that spec, right? Everyone's buying it at a higher spec. And that's where I think, to your point, if you're going to properly compare like a Tesla Model Y to an Equinox, you have to go and look at spec for spec, right?
Yeah,
And
do an
then
RS,
look
and
at
right
that.
now I click. Yeah, and right now I
Yeah.
click on RS. Look, 46. So
Which is about a Model Y. It's about a Model
yeah,
Y, you know?
so Yeah, it's very interesting. But I would still say, so I would not write off this base model because okay, you can live without those features. It's not great, but it's very interesting. And then the other feature, which is pretty crazy, is a convenience package two, which costs 11,400, which is probably the most expensive option you can ever find on a GM vehicle. And this one includes ventilated driver and passenger front seats. Great option. Not quite worth $11,000 though. And you get a bunch of
driver
other
me
stuff like.
driver memory presets. Like I don't know if the extra 3 grand to get. I mean, I do live. I enjoy the driver memory. It's super nice and convenient because my wife and I share vehicles. But like,
Mhm.
is it worth 3 grand? I don't know.
Yeah.
That is crazy. Yeah.
And then if you want Super Cruise, I guess Super Cruise for 30. Okay, so you want Super Cruise, you have to add on the, I believe it's a convenience package too.
Wow. Yeah.
So yeah, very expensive.
It's not a one for one, you know. But I
This
mean,
is
I will
50
say,
grand.
but the fact is, I think it is admirable that they are able to, as a traditional automaker, make something that is at least somewhat comparable to Tesla, even if
Yes.
the price ends up being about the same. Like they're trying to play these weird games with the numbers, like you're pointing out here, right? But
Hmm.
the fact that you could actually get a GM Model Y essentially for a similar price, I think is interesting because, you know, with Elon being as controversial as he is, some people are just looking for a non-Elon associated vehicle that has all those
Hmm.
things. And then there you go, boom, you know, relatively similar spec Equinox is a great option to those folks, you know.
Yes. And here's, I think, one other thing I'll say. Obviously, those features are kind of a joke when they charge you so much money, but that does not detract from the fact that with the tax credit, this car with destination fees is 27.5. 27.5 for a 319-mile range EV. Yeah, the window switches don't go up automatically, whatever. The fact that you can still get that car for 27.5 is incredible with 319 miles of range. I mean, just think about how much range that is. That's incredible. Charging capabilities are kind of mad. It's like around, I think it averages like 90 kilowatts from like 10 to 80%. Not a ton, but it's um, better than the Bolt for sure. And it's a good looking car and it's a crossover and it has a bunch of redeemable characteristics to it. And the fact that you can get that for 27.5, like keep in mind, that's cheaper than like a Nissan Rogue. That's cheaper than a RAV4. That's cheaper than probably the gas powered Equinox. I think it, or probably very similar price, I would assume.
It's like it's in the similar range, which I think that's impressive overall that they were able to keep it in a very similar range to the gas equivalent. And so I'd be
Mm-hmm.
interested to see how well this sells over the next couple of months, especially if I don't know if you want to bring up the EV deal of the week, because
Yes.
I think I think once you start talking these sort of numbers, people start going like, oh, I could do that. I could try it out for that much, you know?
Yes, 100%. So without further ado, I will bring us into the final point of our episode today. And if I make sure this is right tab, here we go. Okay, I will single handedly debunk the myth that EVs are expensive for the 1%, whatever, because news networks want to tell you that electric cars are $60,000 and they're only for the wealthiest of buyers, which, yeah, there's some expensive EVs out there, but there's also some really cheap ones that people purposely ignore. And right now, let's look at this. You can get a brand new Equinox EV. This is a dealership in Alabama called Donahue Chevrolet, who prides himself on no dealer fees, no commission salespeople, no market adjustments. I've messaged them before. They seem like a pretty honest dealership. But look at this. Right now, they're discounting $35,000 Equinoxes. So right now, you're looking at about $33,000 for a brand new Equinox EV. Keep in mind, 319 miles of range. It's an SUV and brand new 2025 model year. You can get this car with the tax credit out the door. Your out the door price would be 25.5, brand new electric SUV. And if you qualify for some of the additional incentives, so there's if you currently own a non-GM vehicle or leasing one that's newer than 2010, which is probably most car buyers looking at buying this vehicle, you get an additional $1,500 off the price. And if you're a Costco member, you get another $1,000 off the price of the car. So if you qualify for both of those incentives, you can walk out the door with this car for $23,000.
That's crazy. That
$23,000.
See, that starts to enter into the conversation of like affordable EVs, right? Because
Yes.
that right there, I think it's like the 20 to 26K is
Mhm.
seen as like affordable brand new cars, right? Yeah,
Yeah, a brand new Nissan Rogue is 30,006 or 30, basically $31,000 for a brand new Nissan Rogue, which is arguably one of the most mediocre gas cars on the market, and it's just not a great vehicle. But this Equinox EV is really good overall. It has decent performance, not great. It's front wheel drive, whatever. That's besides the point. This car, you can get it for under $25,000 with these additional incentives. Brand new. Even with taxes, you're probably still looking under 25,000 if it's 23.
I, I think we're entering into some pretty exciting territory if this
Mhm.
is replicable and sustainable, you know? Like this makes it like an every person car, you know? Like it's awesome. Um, I love to see how well the Equinox does overall and how well it does from like a maintenance perspective.
Yeah, and I will say, like historically, I had a Chevy Bolt, great car, no really reliability issues with it, and the Bolts are really reliable. I like you rarely hear any issues with them. So hopefully they took some of that reliability prowess and implemented into here. So
For sure, for
yeah,
sure. But I
I
mean, I
mean,
think this is the new era, right? Like if more manufacturers can build in, you know, maybe not a Ford F-150 at 25, because even Ford F-150, I think the gas version starts at what, like 30, I want to say. But
yeah,
if
I
you
think
can
like
get,
mid 30 range.
but if you can get an EV, right? Like if you can make an EV a crossover that's like this, I'm sure GM can make EV trucks and other vehicles across their lineup to be right in that affordability range. So I think this is really exciting. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think I mean yeah, just the fact that this vehicle because keep in mind, like the Chevy Bolt EUV, that one was it was cheaper. It was like a few $1,000s cheaper. You could get them for probably in the low 20s when that was around. But this is so much better than the Bolt because you get way more range, you get better charging capabilities, all this stuff. I mean, this car is like probably the bargain of the year that you can walk out the door with this really nice looking electric SUV for such a low price. Because it's like you can't compare this to any internal combustion engine crossovers at this point. Like anything that's similar, you just can't compare it to. Like you can't compare it to a Ford Escape because the Ford Escape's $30,000. This is significantly cheaper. And if people are like, oh, well, this has government incentives, that's literally the point of them. The point of them is to bring down the price to make them more affordable. And if you're complaining about it, then you could just buy one and get the tax credit if you really,
I
yeah.
mean,
So,
yeah, it's there, right? So either you're going to take
mhm.
advantage of it, or you can sit on the sidelines and watch someone else take advantage of it, right?
Yeah, you could buy a Ford Edge for $40,000 if you want. That's a fantastic vehicle. It
Yeah, but then you're going to
gets
deal,
25 miles
yeah,
per gallon.
yeah, and then you're going to deal with all those maintenance issues that we were talking about. So,
Yeah.
you know, I think it's exciting to see cars in the affordable range for people. I think the big one of the biggest complaints that I've heard from people isn't that they don't trust EVs as reliable vehicles. I think people get their reliable vehicles. The biggest complaint is it's too much money, right?
Hmm.
And right here, you're seeing that like that's not necessarily the case, right? This is extremely affordable, especially if people. There are some people who also have a thing against buying used cars. So like here,
Hmm.
brand spanking new car in a super affordable range. It's worthwhile to check out, you know, for sure.
Yes. If you can find a better internal combustion engine SUV, we can do an 8-year cost analysis on it just to see total cost of ownership. If you can find something better that's under 25.5, please let me know because guess what? It's not going to exist. It doesn't exist at all. Equinox EV undercuts pretty much everything on the market, and I truly think it is such a good deal that no one can pass up. And there's no longer the excuse that EVs are too expensive because you can't even get a gas car this cheap brand new, let alone an SUV.
100%. Well, awesome for sharing. Thanks for sharing that. I think I'm pretty excited. Regardless of the new Trump administration, we're in some new exciting times for the industry. We'll see how it happens, see how it all plays out. And I'm just, fortunate to see and be a part of it. So awesome.
Definitely. It's going to be very exciting. Probably lots of developments in the next few months, so we'll be sure to cover them. Overall, I think, yeah, I mean, the industry is definitely heading in one direction. Could there be roadblocks? Could there be bumps? Sure, but I don't think that's going to detract from the overarching goal of electrification.
100%. 100%. I'm right there with you. So cool.
All
That's it
right. Till
for
we
this
speak
week.
next week. Yep,
Yeah.
we have some exciting guests lined up for the next few weeks. So, yeah, thank you everyone for watching.